Tim Coach. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Tim for a few years now. He's in the tech industry like me. He has a military background. That's what I start the conversation with, and how has it shaped and affected his personal and business life. After the military, he went into tech field, hired a managed service provider, eventually joined a managed service provider. Was in that industry with that firm for a long time, decided to branch out and go over to what we call the dark side, become a vendor that works with MSPs. And we talk about that transition, what it was like. He's now at a security firm called Sonomi, which specializes in security for managed service providers. We talk about much more than that, about what MSPs need, and extends right out to small to medium-sized businesses as well, and what keeps them up at night. And what a lot of times these small businesses are led by a great engineer or by a great skilled person that doesn't have the best business or sales experience or expertise, so they need help in that area. But it's a great conversation with Tim. We go on for quite a while. He's so well rounded. I like I said, I've known him for a long time. Just a lot of great knowledge, a great person to work with, very dependable, and his view on discipline was very interesting. Very interesting take. Thanks for listening and watching. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Excited to talk to you, Tim. Known you for a long time. Thank you for your time today. Tim, what has the military done, your experience in the military done for you, both personal and professionally? How's it shaped you?
It taught me to be a human, right? So I think, early on, what you do is your parents teach you right and wrong, morality. This is the way in life. This is the right decisions you make, right? But when you're 18, you don't know how to be an adult, right? Like the world says, go out, start being an adult, do that. You really don't have to do it. So for those of us that choose the military lifestyle or choose the military route, one, it teaches you the expanded version of your parents, right? How do you be responsible? How do you take responsibility of others? How do you execute things that are expected of you to a level that's beyond your expectations in general, right? Then on the other side of it, for me, processes and procedures, standards. How do you go about taking something that you do every day and creating it in a manner that, whether it's you, the person below you, two people below you, a person above you, two people above you, and get as best you can the exact same result every time. And the only way you can really do that is through standards, processes, and procedures. So for me, the military was really taking what my mom in a single mother home environment had taught me, and the community, right? Because we all talk about it takes a tribe to raise a child, right? So there was certainly a strong hand by other community members and gentlemen in my life that taught me, how to be a man and stuff like that. The military just reinforces that, teaches you how to be a better human, teaches you how to escalate the level of expectations upon yourself, as well as the expectations of what you expect to get out of your own work, your own time and energy. So for me, that's really what set the path for me going forward in life, was understanding what I could do as a person, that roadblocks were only roadblocks if I chose to let them be in my way, and that really I could do anything I wanted. And that's something that I've been pretty passionate about for years, because we we're in these environments where people talk about, well, this holds you back and that holds you back. And like, look, I grew up in government housing, right? Back in my day, it was okay to call them low rents,
Mm.
right? So I grew up in low rents, right? Our rent was based off of what my mom made in, the three jobs that she worked. And here I am today, you know, get through school, go to the military, start working jobs, go to college, start in the tech world. And here I am today, traveling the world,
Mm.
representing companies with great technology, helping people to further themselves or their businesses. So the military teaches you there are no roadblocks. The only
Mm.
roadblocks in front of you are those that you choose to let be roadblocks.
Do you want to connect with business leaders and engage consumers who take action? The Joey Pinz podcast delivers high-impact conversations to an audience of decision makers, entrepreneurs, and professionals across multiple industries. A fast-growing audience of highly engaged listeners, both B2B and B2C. Millions of listens and views across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Brands that sponsor us see real engagement, conversations, and brand loyalty. Whether you're looking to sell a service, promote a product, or establish thought leadership, our sponsorships offer premium ad placements, exclusive episode sponsorships, full season branding, and event partnerships. Don't just advertise, become part of the conversation. Visit us at joeypins.com/sponsor to get started, or email us at sales@joeypins.com. Joey Pinz Podcast, where thought leaders, brands connect. Seems like a worthwhile, like most youths, especially, I'm going to just say it right now, to boys, men, I mean, that it just don't have any kind of direction. This seems it's a worthwhile investment. I mean, many countries force or enforce their people, their youth to serve in the military for a year.
Yeah, I think it's both ways, right? I mean, it's like for men and women. Like I can tell you for a fact, I have this thing. It's like even a bad soldier is a great employee
Mm.
because they went through that process of learning to do something where they didn't have control, right? Because when you go to the military, you literally sign your life over. You are in you are an asset of the U.S. government to be used in a way that the U.S. government chooses to use you. And that's true of all militaries, right? I've certainly got friends that are part of various military groups around the world, and that's just true. But I think both men and women, we're raised with these expectations of what we're supposed to do. And then the military says, okay, that's cute. Here's what you can do
Hmm.
as a person, right? And I think that's really a great thing for those that choose that life, especially like so. So not only did I grow up single mother house, low rents, I grew up in a dried up mining community in Oklahoma, right? Like I think there was maybe 600 kids in my entire class. I think I graduated with like 18. Um, and those small towns, if you're not really one of those kids that like are uber smart or uber athletic and have all these directions for you, the military is a great way to get out of that environment
Hmm.
and kind of get something more past what you've known, right? So once ago, it goes back to barriers and roadblocks. The military allows you, regardless of what your physical entity looks like or appears to be, to excel past what expectations are set upon you in an impoverished area, or as a man, or as a woman, or as whatever you choose to be. The military gives you the opportunity to excel past those.
Hmm. And why not make a career out of it? Why did you leave?
It changed. For me, it changed. Like, and I could say this probably of every generation, right? The generations before me were like, oh, we're much harder than you guys. You guys are soft.
Mm.
Um, for me, it became a point where the amount of micromanagement become became so much that it was like, listen, I've done 8 years. I've been to war. I've led men and women, right? Like I essentially, for me, I outgrew the military. I didn't
Hmm.
see the path for me as that retirement phase. Originally, I just went to the military to get to 21 because I wanted to be an Oklahoma State trooper, is what
Hmm.
I wanted to be.
Hmm.
Um, And then so the military was never really looked at from my aspect as I was going to be a lifelong career. It was just a way to make up time between A and B. And then when I did finally get out of the military, uh, and I found out how much our law enforcement people make, I was like,
Mm.
there's no way. Like, unless you're going like super high end, which I did have the option to do. I hadn't been home in almost 10 years, so I decided to go home for a bit, did some different things there, and then decided to go on to college, which is what ended up leading into my tech world.
That's where you found technology in college?
Yeah, so I was 30 years old. I was working in a plant in Joplin, Missouri, making roofing shingles. Right, so on the line, and don't get me wrong, it was a great job, great benefits. Like at 30 years old, like that was a premier job in that area, is to work for that company. And I was just like, I got all this money from the military to go to school. I don't want to use my body for the rest of my life to make my
Mm.
living because my
Mm.
body was already somewhat broke down. So I started in what I call the you're not smart enough to go to college classes, which are, you got to take a couple of pre-algebras and this and that. And in the process, I was just like, man, you got to be kidding me. Like, people take 5 years to do this. Like, so for me, I went back and started doing some research, and I found that there were accelerated schools, right, where I could get through things fairly quickly. I found one in Kansas City. So I literally sold everything I owned in one lump sell, um, and then moved to Kansas City. I originally moved up to go to this school. It's called DeVry University. I originally moved up to be a CPA because I had a buddy that was a CPA, and I'm like, well, if that guy's got it, I can do that.
Huh.
So I took about half a class, and I'm like, this is not my jam. Like
Mm.
like this is not the path I want to go. So the counselor introduced me to computers, and for me, because I'm mechanically minded and I like using my hands, it really made sense because in a car back in the day, now it's not so much, but back in the day, you turned a key and the expectations were the wheels turned.
Mm.
And if something happened between that key and the wheel, there was a successive line of troubleshooting problems that you could go through to figure out the problem. Computers very much the same. I want to push the power button and I need to send data over this magic thing called the internet to some other place to get a desired result. So for me on the networking side of the house, which is where I was, it was very mechanical, right? And then moving on into, I interned with the Harley Davidson manufacturing company here in Kansas City,
Hmm.
and then I ended up taking a job with a national wide company that introduced me to some super high level technology early on in my career. And that's what it was. If I've got a spoken hub network in the Boston area and it's not communicating to my spoken hub network in the Kansas City area, then there's something wrong. And how do I go from the DMARC to the cloud to the DMARC to the servers?
Mm.
All a very mechanical thing. So for me, it made sense, and that's how I ended up in technology.
Hmm.
I had no desire to be in computers. I'm not like these kids. Like, I was in class with 18-year-old kids that were wizards already, and I'm like the old man in class that just doesn't like. Oh, okay. What's a command line?
Mm.
Now later on, I was quite well good at the Cisco back end doing phone systems and routers and switches and stuff like that. But early on, if you asked me about a command line, I couldn't have told you what that was from the GUI.
Hmm. And how did you get introduced to managed service providers?
So I started working for a company called KCG, which is a big corporate entity to essentially drywall resellers around. I think we had 50 or so locations around the states, but we also manufactured actual joint compound was some of the companies, and then we also had another company that created the trucks that everybody sees going down the road with the drywall on them, right? So big part of that. But when you're a three-man shop and you're working for a 750,000 employee company, three guys, especially when one of them or two of them are heavily based in SQL, because we did a ton with our SQL databases back then because we had custom written software. That's not a lot of people to support this massive network, because I mean, I had VM farms and Citrix farms and SQL clusters, and I had LANs and MANs and WANs all over the place. I remember back in the day when you get a DS3 and you thought you were the hottest thing, like,
Hmm.
man, my data is lightning fast, right? So, so in the process of doing that, you recognize that you don't have enough bodies on keyboards, right, to get the work done, whether it's help desk, whether it's I need to, you know, refresh my network environment. I got to bring in new switches, whatever the scenario is. So I partnered back then with I was partnered back then with a company. Um, Turned out to be the same company that I did some work with when I was at the Harley Davidson manufacturer, and they were our MSP. So for me, that was a critical partnership, because I was, and I will always say, I am an above average, if not excellent, administrator of technology systems.
Hmm.
I am not a implementer. I'm not a tier 3 engineer. I certainly understand it. I can certainly figure it out, but I'm not the guy that's going to come in and forklift a Citrix system. I'm not the guy that's going to come in and forklift a VM farm, right? That's not my jam. Now, on the Cisco side of the house, I spent a lot of time traveling to all of our locations, putting in new phone systems, switches, routers, all of that stuff, and I could program that back in. But when you're talking about the complex amount of technical systems of various flavors that our clients use, and you're talking medical, legal, manufacturing, the industry list goes on, internal technical talent simply cannot be an expert at all of it. So that's how I got introduced to the MSP, because I needed people that were experts in fields outside of mine, specifically the installation, to help me with the job that I was doing.
And did you ever end up working for an MSP?
Yeah, so that's what's funny is the same MSP, I ended up firing them,
Hmm.
right? Because the sales guys was great, but the technical team couldn't deliver
Hmm.
what was being asked of them. And
Hmm.
and a lot of it was due to back then the MSPs, right? We just ground our people in the dirt back then, right? It's like, I need you to work on the help desk, doing projects, whatever the scenario is, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then when you leave at 5, go by McDonald's, shove something down your throat, because you got to be on site at the client at 5:30, and you got to do this new install, or you got to work on this issue. And if you're not done till 5 a.m., okay, you can come in at 8:15 the next day,
Wow.
right? So what happened is the technical people weren't delivering because they simply had too much work on their plate, right? And this is very, like, everybody from the 2000s, early 2000s, that, like, this is going to resonate with them, right? So I fired that company and went with another company, knew the owner fairly well. And essentially, him and I had a conversation, and he was like, about me firing them. I felt so bad about firing them. I bought my sales rep a $2,000 fly fishing rig,
Wow.
because it was like, we just felt bad,
Wow.
because it wasn't his fault. And they were capable of doing it. They just didn't have the time.
Hmm.
Um, so the gentleman, in the course of the conversation, basically was like, okay, well, if you're all that, why don't you come over here and try to manage this? And I was 7, 8 years. I don't know if that was that far in, but I'd worked for this company for several years. Um, my boss had grew up with the owners, was younger than I. There was really no career advancement. Now, that was a great company, and I could have spent my entire life and career there, and they would have taken care of me in every way, shape, and form. But there was just no career advancement. And in our world, you're taught that corporate ladder, you got to keep climbing it. You got to
Hmm.
keep climbing it. Whether you like, if your favorite rung was 3 rungs below, it doesn't matter. You got to keep climbing that ladder. And that's how it was back then. So the opportunity was there. I jumped over, and it took me about 48 hours to be like, what did I get myself into,
Mm.
trying to manage the chaos of what happens on a day-to-day MSP. And the reality of it is I heavily depended on my military background with standards, processes, and procedures to start lining things out. Working with, they just hired a I can't remember if he was a VP or a P at the time that had some experience. Him and I kind of hit it off well. Still friends today. We still go to lunch, things of that sort of thing. But it's like between him and I, it was just like the mass. And what was funny about it is when we started, there was an individual leaving, was not happy about leaving, told us that we would never break $100,000 a month in MRR. And by the time, and by the time that I left, a little about 3.5 years later, we had gone from less than $1 million company to 7.5 million.
Wow.
So we broke through the 100,000 pretty quick. And then we were able to specialize specifically in banking, a couple other fields. And that's what really helped accelerate us was the standards, practices, procedures, create the consistency, deliver the same thing to everybody kind of culture. And at the same time, actually have everybody enjoy working there and working together.
Mm.
Sometimes that means, uh, the cancers, right? The bad apples in the group, you got to exit those and bring other people in. So that's where I started in my MSP career.
So why'd you leave that? I mean, you're growing. Sounds like a great opportunity there.
Yeah, we'll call it a character fracture or a
I see.
disagreement,
I see.
right? So um, it was early on before M&A was really this hotbed topic,
Around
right?
what year?
Oh man, what we'll say? We'll say 2003, maybe.
Oh, early 2000s. Okay.
Yeah. So it was really like this hotbed topic of somewhere in the early 2000s. Before that, and the owner wanted to acquire, and it just wasn't like the rest of us just didn't feel like it was the right time to acquire. Like we'd made some promises to the staff, we'd done some other things, and essentially it was just a leadership on multiple levels with multiple people uh, just didn't believe in the path that we were going down. So, quite honestly, I don't know, probably half to 2/3 of that staff decided to take other avenues at that time.
Hmm.
And I had been successful enough at that time and had partnered with Joe Spiller, who my business partner, best friend, surrogate father to my children when I'm out of town and I need someone to do man stuff like take my son to a metal concert or things like that. One of several people that do that when you travel because you need friends. Once again, the tribe raises the children.
Hmm.
Um, so him and I had developed this knack where we were actually consulting and just being good stewards of our industry, and we had gotten the opportunity from another company to come over. They were about it. They'd made an MSP acquisition. They were about $1 million in debt. They were trying to get to a point where they could sell the entirety of the business, which the MSP was just a department of their overall company. And um, so we went over there and to dig them out, get them on the positive side so that they could exit the overall business. And then went to another company and another company, and we consulted with, I don't even know how many companies overall we consulted with by the time it was said and done. I still consult today, right? So I still have a bunch of side projects. The only difference is not only do I consult on the MSP side, but I now consult on the vendor go to market strategy for new upcoming companies. Well, for that matter, I got companies that have been doing this for 20 years that are, call me up and be like, hey, can I get an hour to talk about XYZ? So the consulting thing just became a part of it. And that's just like one company after the other. Um, and that continued until, I don't know, 5 years ago when things I just, It was just, I get bored sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like, and when you're rebuilding MSPs, every one of them is unique, but you're still applying the overall strategy to the uniqueness of each of them,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And for me, it was one of those things where I had the opportunity for ownership and work down that path. Had ownership in some, and what I found is I can be the visionary, but I love to be the implementer. I love to
Hmm.
be the person that takes the far-fetched ideas and bring that to someone's reality and show them, yeah, there is a way to do it. Um, so that's where the consulting satisfaction comes in, is still being able to help people, still being a good steward of my industry, helping others. Now, obviously, that's all done for a fee, but the fee is really nominal to the enjoyment I get out from helping other companies build and grow their own companies. So, about 5 years ago, decided to make a change. Talked to all the who's who of our industry. Right, I could sit here and name drop, and everybody would know them all. And they were all like, "Yeah, come over. You got to do it." So I think I was like 5 days into like having this conversation before I had the opportunity to go work for uh, a couple of gentlemen that had built. Uh, One had owned his own MSP, so he knew the pain. He had already built the company and sold it off, and then had another person at the industry at the time that was considered to be, as channel chiefs go, a solid guy in that area. It helped with companies growing them, and they decided to bring me on as their director of channel, and made the jump then. And now it seems I've got a knack for taking companies into the North American and EMEA markets. Uh, Obviously the last company was the APAC market as well, but yeah, so that's where it seems to end up. And it's just like life's taken me on this great run of helping people grow their businesses.
Tim, let's talk about going to the dark side, right? So a lot of the MSPs would say that once you make the transition, and many of them do it, the pitch at competition where the ConnectWise has, you have all these vendors that are mostly ex-MSPs, become vendors. They find a solution that worked for them and they try to sell it. But when you became a vendor and you had to switch that hat, did you find that it was difficult to gain the trust of a lot of the MSPs?
I did not, because I speak their language.
Hmm.
Right? So it's very much different from you're a salesperson, right?
Hmm.
And you've just gone from entity to entity and grown. And don't get me wrong, we have great people on our channel that have done that, right? But they don't know the pain of a 0 day. They don't know the pain of the internet's actually out, and the issues that's going on. They just don't know those
Hmm.
pain points.
Hmm.
Right. So for me, I was received well because I came in, I speak their knowledge, I know exactly what their processes and procedures are. Right. I call them where BS is BS, and we all know where that is, and we all have a good chuckle about it. Right. But it's because I lived that, and I've grown MSPs and I've consulted with MSPs, that I think I was so well received. And genuinely, I'd like to think it's because I'm a nice, decent human, and I treat others with respect, and I kind of get that back in return.
Your brand deserves to be in front of the right audience decision makers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ready to take action. That's exactly who listens to the Joey Pinz podcast. Thousands of engaged business leaders and consumers tune in every week. Millions of views and listens across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Sponsors see real impact, higher engagement, brand trust, and conversations. We offer strategic partnerships tailored to your goals, including targeted ad placements, branded guest appearances, multi-episode and event sponsorships. Make your brand part of the conversation. Let's grow together. Visit joeypins.com/sponsor to explore sponsorship opportunities, or email us at sales@joeypins.com. The Joey Pinz podcast, where brands and thought leaders connect. That's certainly the case. But oftentimes, vendors, even though there's some ex-MSPs there, they still kind of stray in their offerings and how they talk to MSPs. It's difficult sometimes to keep reminding them of what the needs are of an MSP. When I talk to MSPs every day, I'm a former MSP, as you know this, and generally speaking, last 4 or 5 years, the three things that keep MSPs up at night. Number one is security. They're worried about their clients getting attacked. You talked about 0 day. Two is human capital. If they lose a great technician, how are they going to replace? How are they going to get new ones? Very difficult climate for that. And three is just general growth. Generally speaking, a lot are tech led. They're not good at organic sales, marketing engines. PE has turned the industry upside down. So they're saying things like bottom line multipliers and language I've never heard them say before. But generally, three things keep them up at night. Do you feel that's the case? How do those resonate with you?
I think the conversations for the MSPs are always the conversations, right? Here's what's funny is I was in Boston a few weeks back, and I went through the Paul Revere house. Well, Paul Revere, for those that don't know, also was a craftsman, right? And if you go into his house, it talks about a couple things, but then you get into the one part of the area where it talks about him as the craftsman and the business person, and the exact same problems.
Hmm.
I get people in, I train them up, and then they leave.
Hmm.
Like it's written there. Like I'm sitting there, and it's
Hmm.
a couple of us went there and read that, and then we start having a conversation about how Paul Revere had the exact same problem that we have now today, which is you can't find people. When you do find them and you get them trained up, they either start their own practice or they leave, right? So for me, that always comes down to a culture issue,
Hmm.
right? People will call you up and say, why did you take this person or why did you do this? And my question to them is, why'd they leave you?
Hmm.
Right? Like that's the real question. Now, when it comes to our MSP friends, we all we all say security, but security is inevitably an extremely difficult thing to manage, right? It's still clumsy. There's still no centralized way to really do it, right? So these things that the MSPs are talking about, and the thing I talk about is how do we as vendors put it into their phrases and the way that they hear and the way that they know and show them, right, how that works. So for me, the first product was like, no MSP knows what their incoming or outgoing licenses is. They all think they do,
Hmm.
but very few of them actually do. So the first one was a visual representation of that. Here's what you're spending and here's what you're selling. If it's off, then you've either got too many or too little,
Hmm.
or you're not charging enough, right? The second company was how do we resolve help desk tickets faster? And I'm not talking about the complex ones, but the minutia, the day to day, the stuff that we do every day. How do we do that? How do we reduce those labor costs? Right? This company is talking about, how do we make that journey in your security world or your compliance world? How do we take you through that journey and make that easier? Right? A lot of that comes down to reducing labor cost. How do you
Hmm.
make your people more efficient? Like we're no longer grinding them in the dirt, but are we making them as efficient as they can be? Because when you put on the consultant hat, you go in and one of the first things you look at is how profitable is the company.
Hmm.
And then when you really dig down into it, you start looking at how profitable are you on a contract? Because like right now, if you were still in the MSP world and I said, how profitable are you as a company? You already have a percentage in your head, right? The problem with that percentage is that's an overall percentage of your company. If I say, how profitable are you per contract, that's a whole other
Hmm.
conversation
Hmm.
that really gets down deep into what's keeping you from growing from a revenue stance, from a people stance, from I want to make an acquisition or I want to sell. Where's my EBITDA look like? So there's quite a bit in that conversation that we can talk about all the way from Paul Revere having the same problem with keeping people to the fact that managing what should be top of mind and first of mind for everybody, which is security, is still a very clumsy and awkward thing to bring forward.
Hmm. So how does Synomi do it differently?
If I would, not go into the full sales pitch, the way I think Sonomi does it differently is we're doing a gap analysis of your overall security, right? If you really get down to it, because right, like there's words, there's marketing words we can use, right? There's all these great phrases, but let's talk about what we actually do as an MSP. The first thing you do is you go in and you assess your client. You put them through some kind of assessment. What are you stepping into? Once you have that data collected, the next thing you do is look at that data, analyze it, and come up with a remediation plan, right? The next thing you do, and normally in there, some kind of MRR product built into it. The next thing you do is you present that project to the client and say, here's what we need to do to just bring you to standards, right? Then the next part of that is the MRR piece of it. And then the final part is the day-to-day management of it, right? So that's a normal avenue to introduce, whether it's a new server farm or a new line of revenue into a client, right? All you got to do is add the word security on the first part of that, which is assessment, right? So jump into Sonomi, takes you about 10 questions to set up a client. You can say, okay, I'm going to put them against industry best practices, right? And obviously gather that data, throw it all into an AI engine, right? And then we're going to answer some questions about the company specifically. How secure are you? Do you have the right switches in place to say that you are secure, or do you just think you are?
Hmm.
Right? And then you do the same thing we always do, right? Internal, external scans, right? Same data you use in the assessment, you're just now using it in the security piece of it. What comes out of that is a framework in time of where you currently set in your overall security posture, right? And that's unbiased. It doesn't matter if you're using the best of the best or the worst of the worst. We're going to show you in your current security posture, according to best practices, according to CIS, CMMC, right? Whatever framework you so choose, we're going to show you at that point in time how you measure against that. So now we're kind of talking about looking at an overall security management standpoint,
Hmm.
right? Because if we're talking about, I want to meet CIS standards, you're obviously going to be low, or more than likely, you're going to be less than what the standard is. Okay, so we know where you're weak and we need to take you strong, right? There's the gap analysis. The difference in our gap analysis is we actually provide the policies, the reports, we provide the task, right? So in the old days, if you remember, when you went out and went to do a project, you would do the assessment, and then you would have to take that assessment and probably give it to your one of your highest cost labor resources, which is a tier 3,
Hmm.
and say, figure out whatever it is. I'm going to throw in my WatchGuard if I'm a WatchGuard shop, or a
Hmm.
Cisco, or whatever the scenario is, right? Sonic Wall. I'm going to throw this in. These are our standards. We're going to do this. But we got a whole bunch of configuration issues, right? There's a whole bunch of dirty data, back talking. We got a bunch of chatter. And then what happens is those tier 3s go out and spend hours upon hours of researching that entire thing to say, okay, here's how we can clean it up. Well, that's a lot of human labor,
Hmm.
right? Sonomi, we just give you all those tasks. If you want to know how to become stronger in 2FA, if you want to know how to stronger in your website, if you want to know how to become stronger in your remote access, we literally give you every one of those tasks. So now all I'm doing is taking the list that Sonomi's already created, giving it to that tier 3 and saying, how many hours is it going to take you to do these tasks? So now instead of them going out and researching it, most of them know. A good tier 3 will, off the top of his head, will know, or her head, right? Because we have plenty of great women out there that are doing this job too. Most of them will know 80 to 90% of it, exactly how much time it's going to take them to do that. But guess what we've done? We've just cut out all of the research, all that labor resource that we're losing efficiencies and capability on our tier 3 because we got them going down the Google rabbit hole
Mm.
trying to figure out how to fix the problem. So we're telling you how to fix it. Now you have that. Now you already have the ability to throw in a remediation plan simply based off what we're doing. Now, we also will show you obviously what's critical, what's not critical, right? Some things are important, some things are not. But if you're an MSP and you got an incident that happened to a client and they're coming to you and you need to show them quickly how you can make an improvement in their world, we will show you the best bang for the buck on our critical status, like what type 5 things are going to increase your posture score the best, right? How are we going to take you from a 7 to an 8 or from an 8 to a 9, whatever that scenario is overall? We show you that. So you can go to your tier 3 as the manager or as the CISO or as the lead security person and say, hey, we need to do this whole thing, but these 5 critical things, I need to prioritize those. So now we're creating that consistency across the board to every client. Standards, processes, procedures. Where do you focus your work? Where's my short-term action plan and where's my long-term remediation plan for the entire environment? And then, of course, providing the reports. Obviously, those are white labeled so people can go in and put in, their customized words or however they like to word it. But, creating templates, creating documentation is a time suck because you're literally doing that. So we create that for you. You have the ability to go in and adjust it because it's a lot easier to edit something than it is to create it from scratch. And then, of course, on the very end of it, we provide a timeline that shows you historically, as long as you've been a client, how you improve throughout your process of working with the MSP. So now I can give executives executive level reporting. I can send a link to an executive and say, here's how you've done over the last 6 months with us. Now I'm starting to show ROI, right? Because a lot of places, what happens is we understand how to sell the value of the product, but we don't understand how to sell the ROI. And you got to have both. If I go in and sell you the value, but I don't have a way to show you ROI in 3, 6 months, or a year's time, then the client will immediately be like, why do I continue to pay for this? So that executive level reporting, the ability to add exceptions to the rule. Maybe you're a company that's getting dinged pretty heavy on a website, but the reality of it is you don't use a website. You're all word of mouth. You're in some kind of niche industry where people don't do websites. Okay, well then I'm going to move your critical down to low. I'm going to throw exception or I'm going to throw evidence into the documentation part of the platform. And then that immediately fixes my score to no longer allow for website because being the administrator of that client, I know they don't need that. And people think that you have to be a 10 all over the place. You don't. There's things you need to be a 9 at, and there's things you need to be a 7 at in order to meet the compliances or best practices of our industry or of any industry. And that's true whether you're just trying to say, do you just meet our basic best practices of the industry, or are we trying to hit CMMC2? So probably a little bit more of the sell side of it, but I don't think that's sell side. I think that's, for me, what that is explaining what Sonomi does in a useful way that I can say as an MSP, I can use that. I can do that. This is my language. I already know what he's talking about. So I think that's where I really love Sonomi, is it provides us the ability, even if currently it's a snapshot and it's a point in time, that I know where my security posture is. I can gap analyze that, and I can improve it anytime I so choose.
Tim, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of products under the security umbrella. How does an MSP decide who to partner with?
It's all relationships. You know that, right? Like, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to be there when I call at 4 a.m., right? So I think it's part of it is too, is you got to understand, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to do actual GRC, right, there's a bunch of back end mapping that happens in the GRC world.
It's government.
Right. Right. I'm not trying to do GRC. I'm trying to help manage security and compliance postures on that journey, because that's a never ending journey. Right. But for me, it was always, it's a multiple part evaluation. First and foremost, it's I got to find the tool. Well, before I find the tool, I got to know what the parameters are, right? Because how much do we talk about in the MSP overlap of tools? I've got a lot of tools that are doing the exact same thing. So you got to first create what you need, right? I need this tool, but I needed to tweak it this way or that way, right? Then obviously you can scour the interwebs, right? And you'll never find all the tools. I'm a fan of going to at least a couple of shows a year, a couple of events where you can really concentrate on that one-on-one time with the vendors to better understand what you're looking for. You create that list while you're at the event. You take it back, you set it down, you evaluate it with your management staff. Does this just meet our management needs? Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to bring my techs in, right? If it meets my management needs, then I bring my technical people in. Okay, from the management aspect, we see it hitting all the tick marks. Do you see it as the same way?
Hmm.
And in the end, the technical people have to support it. So if you don't have their buy in, you're just shooting yourself in the foot
Hmm.
right off the bat, because they won't want to use it. So then you get technical buy in. Once you have technical and management buy in, then you start figuring out, how do we replace a tool? How do we go to market if it's a new line of revenue? Right? What does the marketing section look like? What does the sales section look like? How much are we going to upcharge for this? So on and so forth. So I think the way you pick a vendor is exclusive to the needs of what you're looking for. There's certainly stacks out there, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, Huntress is a no-brainer, right? Threat Locker is a no-brainer. Um, for me, I was a huge Sonic Wall shop in my MSP days. It was super easy. It wasn't overcomplicated. I could certainly jump into some of the more complicated worlds, but my clients didn't need that.
Hmm.
Sonic Wall did the job for me. So you certainly create your generic stack based off of what you're looking to do. But as far as like when you really get into evaluating, like an EDR or an MDR solution or something like that, is it doing exactly what you want to do? How much noise is it going to create? And is that justifiable noise, or is it noise for noise sake?
Hmm. I talk to MSPs every day, and they have, they want to talk about something, they want to consult, and generally, I find the three pieces of advice. And this isn't just for MSPs; this is for any small to medium business. I feel, but number one is to join a peer group. You know, talk. It was the thing that turned my MSP around. I didn't feel like I was by myself anymore. I can, get good information. I could bounce ideas off. Two is to adopt a organization operating system. There's plenty of them out there. And
Mm-hmm.
then third would be hire a coach. Now, do you find that when you're talking to MSPs and they're asking you security questions and you're kind of unraveling things, you find that maybe they should adopt one or more of these items?
Like, okay, so now we're getting into MSP maturity,
Yeah.
right? That's a whole other big. Because here's the thing, like you hit on early on, right? Like technical people creating businesses, business people creating businesses. They don't have tech. Here's what I find: people tend to be really good at their craft
Mm.
and really crappy business people,
Mm.
right? Like if you love technology, you're going to be really good at technology, but you probably don't have a lot of business sense, right? Other than what you learn through pain.
Mm.
If you love business, but you don't understand the technology side of it, right? You don't understand the pain, so you don't know how to incorporate that. Now, first and foremost, peer group. 100%. When you're ready to take yourself to the next level, find a peer group. And I don't care which one it is.
Yeah.
Now, I
Doesn't matter.
certainly have my own professional biases, right, of what I like in a peer group and what I liked in a peer group back then. Because I think I started out with the Ingrams that meant like kind of a weird like Ingram Roadshow, like Midwest or Sunflower or whatever it was called way back in the day. And then you start maturing into the groups that, you know, are more aligned. They meet regular. And I think where people fail to understand is what the peer group ends up becoming is like an ad hoc board that's not getting paid. What is the value of that? So you're setting in a peer group, and you may have people there under you, and you may people there millions of dollars over you. They all have something to provide to help you free of charge. I mean, other than your peer group fee,
Right.
right? But you and I both know how many you have way more conversations with those peer group people outside of the peer group, beyond the peer group when you leave the peer group, than you ever have at the designated meeting times, right? 100%. Next level, how do you operate? No one system out there is the best system. You can talk about scaling up, you can talk about EOS, you can talk about a couple other things. You can bring in not quite management system, but ideas like raving fans, right? Things like that. But I'm a fan of EOS because it's simplistic. Now, what you find with any of these, right? I'm just going to talk about EOS because I'm probably the most familiar and I like it the best. That's me. What I find is you implement EOS. First mistake in implementing EOS is you think you can do it yourself. You can't. You're the problem, right? So you need that coach. I'm sorry. I'll put it out there. I know that's going to hack some people off because they're like, oh, I've done a really great job on implementing my own EOS. But nobody's calling you on your BS.
Right.
That's the problem, right? I like EOS from a standpoint because it gets you a lot up front out of the gate. Everything from how you're running your company to how your employees are. GWC, right? Hands down, phenomenal on the employee level. The way that you handle employee issues, phenomenal. Now, there is some debate between KPIs and OKRs, right? Right? There's definitely some debate there and what it fits in. But what happens is what you find is you start going through EOS and you're evaluating people, you're evaluating your company, and then all of a sudden something flips, and now you're holding your vendors, right? Your tool stack to EOS standards. So you continue to grow through that EOS journey. And then what happens is you hit a certain point and you say, you know what? EOS as a whole is no longer quite the fit for my company. But the L10s spot on. GWC spot on. But maybe this over here, we need to take a scaling up section and bring it in. Or maybe you need to take a true methods piece and bring it in, right? I mean, Gary certainly didn't make himself Gary by not knowing what he was doing, right?
Gary
So I
Peak
think
of the
what
best.
happens is we start cherry picking out of all of these great systems to really bring in and hone that. But in order to do that, you have to have that coach that holds yourself accountable. You have to have that peer group that is your ad hoc board that's providing you great, phenomenal advice and not expecting anything in return other than to see you be successful. So those three, batting 1,000, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just MSPs. I think it's small and medium businesses. I think it's just
Large
really,
business.
really good. Yeah.
Oh man, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. Here's my problem. These companies come out and they say we're going to do $100 million in revenue, and they've never done more than 10.
Right.
Where's the data, or what's the path to get there? More importantly, how does everyone in that organization, I don't care if you're a 5-person organization or a 5,000-person organization, how is every department, every leader, every single contributor, every person, place, thing, software supporting the ultimate goal of the business? Because what you find as you grow is the departments, and we're not just talking about MSPs or tech anymore. We're talking about general business. What you find as you grow is your departments become detached from each other, right? They start coming up with their own ideas and their own plans, right? We see this in a lot of startup companies, that the direction of the company is holistically being led by the dev team. That, guess what? they've never worked for their client, so they have no idea what uh, what workflows and work practices mean to that client, right? But on the big side of that, all these departments become disjointed with each other, and they're no longer working towards that common goal. And I think what we're talking about with those three things, you got to align. What's the number one goal of this company this year? And then how does every entity within that company support that goal?
Tim, has there been anything in the last month or so that you changed your mind on?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know. I tend to be pretty open minded about everything, and I love a good conversation that's debatable, like
Mm,
someone that's. I miss the '90s when we could sit down and have a conversation
yeah,
about anything.
right. And still
That
like each other.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily agree, because I can certainly go in and have a very heavy opinion about X, but if somebody else has another opinion that's more recent and they don't update me, and I'm not willing to listen to that information, then I'm lacking in exactly what I should be doing,
Yeah.
which is gathering information to make it more entitled. I think in the last month, I'm pretty good, right? Um, but but that's because I'm always willing to have a conversation and always open to a change.
I think it's important. I think it's important to do that. I recently somebody said to me, I went from well done burgers to medium rare, which is a big move and an
Yeah,
important move. I don't know how you could possibly go that long with well done burgers. I don't.
yeah. I I don't know. Like I think I can't even, like, I'm still like thin pizza's the best. A burger from a mom and pop place is the best,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Food related, sure.
From a technology standpoint, or from a personal, relationships are always face to face. You'll never change my mind. Face to face will always be better,
Absolutely.
right? Because you and I would both love to be in a studio doing this,
Hmm.
because you know the human interaction side of it. When you remove all the technology, you just got a, a crew filming two people. The interaction, although I feel our interaction has always been good,
Yeah.
it's just different, right? So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I got a Mac. I'm working on a Mac now. I've not changed my mind about Macs,
I didn't know that. I
right?
didn't know you're a Mac guy.
Yeah,
Ah.
there's a couple of features I like, right? Like I like the fact that now when I'm working and I get a text, I don't have to pick up my phone because it pops up on my Mac,
Yeah.
because okay, okay, we found one, but it's probably not a month. I did move to an iPhone after never being on an iPhone.
Whoa.
So, and that was primarily due because I was sick of seeing everybody around me working faster at the booth than I was working,
Interesting.
and they all had iPhones. That was the denominator. So I did make the jump to an iPhone, and I do like it. The Mac, I've just not quite gelled with. I don't like it's, when I came up, I had a god level engineer, you know, basically drill into my head that a mouse slows you down.
Mm.
So my hand, I can put my fingers in some very contorted positions to hit the hotkeys to do things, and that's how I'm working. Like I can't tell you the last time I actually used a mouse to hit send, right? Alt S, boom, done,
Wow.
right? Or switching between screens, Alt Tab, boom, 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 boom,
Do
boom.
you
Or if
really?
I'm working on two screens, Alt Tab between the two screens, right? It's all hand movements, right? Trying to relearn the whatever Mac says is more Mac than Windows has been extremely annoying
Mm.
at 53 years of age.
Mm.
I enjoy the video chat, like right now, like my daughter can call me, and if I'm working on my computer, I can just pop it up on my screen. I enjoy that stuff. But as far as like the functionality of the Mac, the all the river row of it, like it took me forever to get two screens to work. I tried to add a third screen, and you would have thought that I asked God Himself to change night to day, right? Like it's just it don't work. And like on a PC, I can have 20
You
screens
sure
as
can.
long as I got a video card big enough. I can
Yeah.
cover any wall you want,
Yeah.
right? So So on the iPhone, 100% changed my mind. On the Mac, still struggling.
Hmm. So Tim, I started I'm pretty sure you know the story, but I started the MSP back in the 90s. I was working way too hard. I was putting, my health in the back seat. I was working 14, 16-hour days. You're no stranger to that. And um, you know, not exercising anymore and eating poorly. And so I'm at the doctor at 340 pounds. And she tells me if I don't lose this weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. So, scared to, piss me off, scared me, all the above. I'm driving home, pissed off, punching the steering wheel. So I took the next 6, 7 months, lost 130 pounds, kept it off. And people always ask me what's the secret? And there's no secret, Tim. Discipline. That's how I kept it off. I had something, a routine, I got motivation. How does discipline play a role in your life, Tim Couch?
I think, well, one is like I'm a pretty fluffy fella, so you see that discipline at the table is not really my thing. I introduce things
Fluffy.
like being on the road, like the way we eat on the road.
Tough.
Like
Yes.
discipline for me is I'm pretty good about making myself have a salad for lunch,
Mm,
right? Just so that's kind of discipline. Sometimes walking away from the bar at 2 a.m. instead of 3 a.m. is a good decision as well.
yes, yes.
But I think for me, discipline is about holding up your end of the bargain with the other person,
Mm,
right? It doesn't matter. They don't care that you're tired. I mean, they do, don't get me wrong. But if you made an agreement with someone like you and I made the agreement to do this a month and a half ago,
sure.
right? It's I flew in on I spent the week in Vegas for Ride a Boom, great event, but Vegas is hard on you,
Yeah.
right? Um, Came in dog tired, didn't get enough sleep yesterday, back to back meetings today. I could have certainly, you were you're a good friend. I could have called you up and be like, hey, dude, I'm just dog. Let's
No
like
problem.
push this off.
Yeah.
But for me, discipline is I committed to do it for somebody else, so I'm going to do it. So
Mm,
show up, right? Be there. Discipline for me is I made an agreement with the owner of the company that I'm going to help him grow his company. How am I going to do that? And that's doing it the best way that I can do it, right? Discipline for me is recognizing that I work for someone, right? And that I'm representing them. So although I can be my, quote unquote authentic self, when I'm at work, I represent the company.
mm.
So the things that may normally pop off out of my mouth or the activities that I may do, like that stuff has to go away, right? So discipline is really to me honoring the commitments you have to others, right? And if that means I'm helping you rebuild your company, then that means if I've worked a full day and I got to set down 2, 3 hours a night to look at the reports you sent me to dig into your environments, then I'm going to do that because that's what I've made. So it's carrying through on the commitments that you've made for me.
Looking for a powerful way to reach business leaders and engage consumers? The Joey Pinz podcast connects brands like yours with an audience that listens, engages, and takes action. High impact exposure with a fast growing loyal audience. Millions of views and listens across major platforms. Sponsors see increased brand awareness, trust, and conversations. We make sponsorships simple and effective with custom ad placements that fit your brand, deep audience engagement through authentic conversations, long-term exposure across podcast platforms and social media. Don't miss the opportunity to connect with your ideal customers. Visit joeypins.com/sponsor to secure your sponsorship today. Or you can email us at sales@joeypins.com. The Joey Pinz podcast, where conversations drive results. Yeah, all too often people don't really follow up on that, and it's an important trait. What motivates you, Tim?
I just love to work. I know
Mm,
that's a really weird thing. I mean,
I do
I
too,
make this
actually.
comment all the time and people kind of cringe at it. But it's like, oh, people, I'll get on the phone, people, oh my God, thank God it's Friday. And I'm like, I know, I only 2 days till I get to come back to work, right? And that drives people crazy, but that's how I was raised. I
Mm,
was raised, and once again, I was raised by, for the first 12 years of my life. I mean, don't get me wrong, my mother was certainly involved, but I was heavily raised by my grandfather as well. right? So I'll say things that may not be as best PC, but his thing was a man gets up and goes to work and provides.
Mm,
That's what a man does,
mm, mm,
right? And I love to do that, and I
mm,
love my work, right? I love helping others, right? You know, I have this phrase, and some people don't quite understand this phrase, but it's I'm here to be in servitude of my industry. And that's what I love about our industry. If you walk into any place where a group of our people are and you say, I need help, the whole group will turn around and say, what are you looking for? Everybody will stop what they're doing. And if it's like, my car's got a flat, yeah, we'll all jump on our phones and start trying to figure out where the best tire shop is to get
mm,
your tire fixed, right?
mm,
Or if it's like I got an employee that's, having some problems at home. I mean, it's not always technical, right? I love being of service to others. And because I do that, work to me doesn't seem to be like work. I mean, a lot of people talk about how much time I spend on a plane. There's certainly people that spend more time on a plane. I love that.
mm,
I love being able to go and sit down face to face. And, one of the things that my booth has always been known for is you can walk up to my booth and we can have a business conversation on something that has nothing to do with the product I'm representing.
mm,
And that's part of what people get when they hire me. That's part of what they get is product A isn't the right answer. Let me go introduce you to someone at product B, right? So those are the things that I love. I love to go to work. I love being part of this industry. I love the relationships. I love meeting people. All of that is probably my best drivers that really kind of make me happy.
mm,
Now, if things aren't delivered to the standards of which have been drilled into me, I can get a little sideways.
mm,
But at the end of the day, you know, I can still go have a steak, still take a shower, I can still have an old fashioned. Like nothing is ever world ending. And as long as you treat people with respect and you love those relationships, I don't think, like for me, that's really not working a day in my life, right? Especially when I remember 0 days at the MSP, or I remember when things went to complete crap
mm,
and you didn't leave the office for 3 days. Like my day is easy.
mm. Yeah, sometimes we can't forget that, we're not digging holes and lifting bricks.
Right. Not everything we're doing is saving a life.
Right.
Now, do I 100% believe that that MSPs as as an industry are the backbone of industry?
Mm,
1000%.
mm,
Without us, nobody could do their jobs. I don't care if you're Walmart, I don't care if you're Harvard, I don't care if you're one of the largest medical facilities in the US. Without the technology and the MSP being the backbone of industry and humanity, it does not function. Think about if you went to the gas station to get gas and it didn't take your credit card,
mm,
and you went in and the ATM didn't give you money. How are you resolving that issue? It takes technology, and more importantly, it takes the people servicing the technology to make industry and kind of humanity as a whole run, right? Doctors across borders, they don't function without the logistics happen in the back end that gets their supplies from point A to point B.
mm. So, given that motivation, Tim, of just working hard and love what you're doing, how do you measure success?
Well, obviously, there's the easy answer by numbers, right? Like, are the numbers going in the right direction, right? But like, so I think, and it becomes different on the human side than I think the business side. On the business side, you measure it by numbers, right? There's things that you can do to affect those numbers. On the human side, it's what does success look like? For me, the longest time was I was seeing people that surpassed me in industry, and
Mm,
that really kind of got my crawl. right? I'm a hard worker. I'm busting my hind end. I'm helping everybody can help. And then I remember, then all of a sudden one day it just hit me. That's my success.
Hmm.
When I see all these people that have worked for me in some way, shape, or form, or I've consulted with, or I've just had a conversation about how to be a good human, and I see them succeeding, then it's a change to where success becomes less about the money, less about the material things, and more about, yeah, you see that person sitting over there? I was part of their career. I
Hmm.
helped them do that,
Hmm.
right? And that becomes the real driver to success is how am I positively affecting the people around me to make them better?
Yeah, impact. Yeah, it's a great reward when you know that a friend, colleague has done well and you played even the smallest part in it.
Right. And you got to put your ego aside, right?
Yeah.
If you're holistically ego driven, the minute one of your former employees passes you, then then you can be jealous of that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like I got a guy right now, this dude, man, he calls me up, still calls me this day for advice. Talks about his golden handcuffs, right? And he has made it. I mean, on every sense of the word, he has made it. But I look at him and I look at what he's doing, and I couldn't be more proud of him because he was like a second or a third lifer. So he was coming into our industry late. He quite didn't know things. He had some misguided understandings. He would let things influence him negatively where they were. But just through the course of working, mentoring, right, helping him, he was able to get his career to a point and then has surpassed that point so far. It's 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 super impressive. And the thing that I love is he's now taken that role on with others,
Hmm.
right? So, and I could go on and on down the road, but removing the ego, being there to help others, mentor where you can. Sometimes it's listening, right? I told my son the other day, we were having a conversation, and I said, listen, sometimes, you know, it helps to say, am I here listening or am I solving? What would you
Hmm.
like me to do?
Hmm.
Right? Because my nature is to fix. Whatever your problem is, I want to
Right.
fix that. But sometimes the person just needs to talk and get something off their chest. And even times from there, they'll actually solve their own problem. Right? Or maybe they need to be or maybe they just need well, it sounds like you already got the answer. You just need to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Sometimes people just want to be heard. Tim, coach, thank you. I've known you for a long time. You're a friend of mine. I appreciate setting this up and thanks for doing it. Anybody listening and they want to or watching want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
oh, easiest way always is Tim Coach at LinkedIn, right? On LinkedIn, like that's probably my go-to. Anyone on the business side, coach at sonomi.com. You can also reach out to me on the business side there. Happy to jump on and have any kind of conversations. Then of course, as you know, there's that small consulting thing I do at the sign, which is Third Power. So coach at thirdpower.net.
Very cool. Tim, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you on the road again, my friend. You be well.
Always my friend, you as well. It was great seeing you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.